Hi everyone, this is Dr. Nitin Chhoda and welcome to Ignition Time. Thank you so much for being a viewer. Folks, I'm going to jump right into it. The latest jobs report reveals some rather alarming trends, specifically the rise in long term unemployment. Individuals who've been unemployed for 6 months or longer. I'll show you this chart on your screen from the US Department of Labor that shows even though the unemployment rate fell 0.4% down to 6.3%. We're still far away from our pre pandemic levels of 3%. And what's a little bit more disturbing is African American individuals. You'll see this chart on your screen. African American individuals, Hispanic individuals, and Asian individuals have higher unemployment rates. Here's another image on your screen that shows you the jobs needed to return to pre pandemic levels in different industries based on the latest information from the US Department of Labor. Folks, take a look at the jobs that are needed in the leisure and hospitality industry. 3.9 million jobs are needed to return to pre-pandemic levels. This tells you about the uneven nature of the recovery and the K-shaped recovery that exists in the country. And folks, speaking of long-term unemployment, you'll see this article on your screen from CNBC, which reads, long-term unemployment is close to a Great Recession record. The January jobs report basically told us that the rate of long-term unemployment, which is individuals who've been unemployed for 6 months or more, continues to rise and is very, very high right now. And folks, what is most disturbing is that 40% of those who are unemployed are long-term unemployed. In other words, they've lost their job for 6 months or longer. This is close to the 46% of unemployed individuals who were long-term unemployed during the Great Recession. So folks, here's the big problem with long-term unemployment. If you've been unemployed for an extended period of time, number one, your skills can decline. Number two, it'll be harder for you to regain your job because your employers probably gone out of business or had to cut their hours significantly. And number three, you may settle for a lower paying job which is not commensurate with your skills. So this is especially dangerous. Skills declining, lost hours probably because your employer went out of business, and then settling for lower paying jobs which are probably lower skill jobs that are not commensurate with your skills, which in turn creates a much more vicious cycle of your skills declining even further. Folks, individuals who are subjected to long-term unemployment fall into the cycle of poverty. Here's the cycle of poverty on your screen, folks. This is a vicious cycle that is very, very hard to break out of, because if you have less money coming in, it affects your standard of living. It affects your ability to buy food. It affects your ability to take care of yourself. And it can lead to mental and physical repercussions that are dangerous, further escalating this cycle of poverty that you see on your screen. The cycle of poverty is exaggerated amongst certain sectors of our population, who are now subjected to long-term unemployment through no fault of their own, because they are in specific industries like travel, leisure, entertainment, and hospitality. Let's go back to the image I showed you from the Department of Labor at the start of this video on your screen again. This shows you the racial disparity. Again, you'll see this on your screen. You'll see African American individuals, Hispanic individuals, Asian individuals are suffering much more and are more likely to be a victim of long-term unemployment, and then are more likely to be subjected to, let's go back to the cycle of poverty. They are more likely to be subjected to the cycle of poverty that you see on your screen, which again has racial components to it and which has actual industry-specific components to it because of the link with travel, leisure, entertainment, and hospitality. Let's show you again that image that shows you the number of jobs that are needed to get back to pre-pandemic levels, and you'll see that the leisure and hospitality industry needs 3.9 million jobs to return to pre-pandemic levels. Again, this shows you the link between specific sectors of the economy like travel, leisure, entertainment, and hospitality, and specific racial elements to this economic recovery. And this shows you that we are in a dire situation. In fact, Jared Bernstein, a member of the White House Council on Economic Advisors, pointed out the racial disparity. He even pointed out a gender disparity because women are more likely to fall out of the workforce than men. Pretty incredible comments from a member of the White House Economic Council, Jared Bernstein. Let's roll the tape and hear what Jared had to say specifically about the disparities and about the disturbing rise in long-term unemployment. Let's roll the tape.
Over the same period, more than 4 million workers have dropped out of the labor force. If you drop out of the labor force, you're not counted in the unemployment rate. And those dropouts have been disproportionately women. It's clear that there's a need for urgent and sustained action for the duration of this crisis. In January, according to the Bureau of Labor Statistics today, just under 15 million people reported they were, quote, unable to work because their employer closed or lost business due to the pandemic. This number has been about the same since October after falling in the wake of the implementation of the CARES Act from May to September. Long-term unemployment has risen. This is a great concern of the administration, reflecting the duration of the economic crisis and the fact that the virus was unconstrained during most of last year. Almost 40% of the unemployed in January had been so for half a year, 27 weeks or more. This 40%, that's an elevated rate, and it represents a shift from temporary layoffs to permanent unemployment. Workers of color have been more likely to lose their jobs than white workers. In January, the unemployment rate for black workers was 9.2% and was 8.6% for Hispanic workers compared to 5.7% for whites and 6.6% for Asian workers. While the unemployment rate for men and women is relatively similar, women have left the labor force in numbers that are of great concern to us. The employment rate among what we call prime age workers, women 25 to 54, is down 4 percentage points, 2.6 million women since February. This larger decrease for women is unusual in recessions and likely reflects both the industries that this pandemic has hit, tourism, services, face-to-face industries, leisure and hospitality, restaurants, and increased care responsibilities that have been pulling women out of the labor force. Certain industries have been especially hard hit. As I mentioned, the unemployment rate for leisure and hospitality workers is around 16%. The elevation in long-term unemployment is especially salient since benefits for these workers will expire soon without further congressional action. Today's report is yet another reminder that our economy is still climbing out of a hole deeper than that of the Great Recession and needs additional relief to ensure that the pandemic can be brought under control, that families and businesses can stay solvent and make it to the other side of this crisis, and that workers can feed their families and keep a roof over their head.
Boy, pretty interesting comments from Bernstein. Folks, let's show you this chart on your screen from the CNBC article. By the way, we'll provide you with a link to the article in the description section below. Let's take a look at this chart. Long-term unemployment is increasing. Let's take a look at what happened back in 2007 and make our way all the way to where we are right now. You'll see that from 2010, after the Great Recession, long-term unemployment started to fall. In fact, it had fallen to its lowest point ever prior to the pandemic, and then it just shot up. It's very significant right now. It's at 40%. Close to 40% of those who are unemployed are long-term unemployed, which means 4 out of every 10 individuals who are unemployed in the country have been unemployed for 6 months or longer. This is a dangerous trend, and this is a horrific trend. Almost 40% of unemployed workers, as you can see on your screen, have been out of a job for 6 months or more, approaching the historical peak that actually happened during the 2008-2009 Great Recession. And folks, the thing that is especially alarming is that long-term unemployment has continued to rise during this pandemic, which means those amongst us who've been impacted have been essentially left behind, folks. This is like a train leaving the station. Let's highlight the gray area on your screen corresponding to the 2008-2009 Great Recession on the left side of your screen. You see that long-term unemployment continued to rise because individuals who had been left behind essentially just had nothing to do. Their jobs were lost permanently. That's why long-term unemployment after the Great Recession of 2008 and 2009 peaked in April 2010 up to 45.5%. And folks, look at the long-term unemployment trends to the right side of this image, and you'll see that gray zone corresponding to this pandemic. And you'll see that long-term unemployment is now at 39.5%. Folks, what this is telling us is that even as unemployment reduces, even as more and more people find their way back into the workforce, the section of the population, the ones who've been impacted the most, the long-term unemployed, are potentially going to continue to rise and may approach 45%, may exceed 45% because of the trends that you see on the right side of your screen right now. Folks, this is an especially concerning sign. According to Nick Bunker, an economic research director at Indeed, the job site, he said, I think that is one of the many concerning things that we see in this report. I think it's even more concerning when you see job gains continue to slow down. Folks, here's another thing that's extremely concerning. Post-pandemic, certain industries have been wiped out completely. A lot of small businesses have had to shut down. So post pandemic, there are actually 10 million fewer jobs. Yes, you heard that right. 10 million fewer jobs. So, folks, we have two major problems. We have close to 40% long term unemployment. And on top of that, we have 10 million fewer jobs. Yep, 10 million fewer jobs. And, folks, according to Heidi Sherholz, who's the director of policy at the Economic Policy Institute, she said it would take approximately 29 years to get back to pre recession levels at the current pace of job growth. And she said that that's a massive hole to fill. And folks, a lot of work ahead for us. So, folks, when you closely analyze the numbers, you understand that the long term unemployment is a dangerous trend and is continuing to go up, which is the alarming thing. And by the way, it really depends how you analyze numbers. Let's take a look at this chart on your screen that shows you total US employment. And this shows you that the total US employment, which fell dramatically, is now starting to rise. But take a close look at the right side of this chart and you'll see that the total US employment is tapering. Folks, these are initial signs of trouble. And then within this graph is the previous graph. When you take a closer look at the data, let's go back to the previous image, which shows you that the long-term unemployment trend is rising. As you can see on your screen, the long-term unemployment trend is rising. This is the trend within the trend. The broader trend is that jobs are coming back at a slower pace and they are stagnating. And within that trend is another trend that long-term unemployment is rising. Folks, I hope you learned something new from this video. Thank you so much for watching. Please click like, please subscribe, please enable notifications. I would really appreciate that. That really helps out the YouTube algorithm a lot. Also follow me on Twitter. You'll see my Twitter feed. Our Twitter community is growing very rapidly. You'll be able to read what I'm reading in real time. You'll be able to follow along in real time. So make sure to follow us on Twitter. Thank you so much for watching. I'm looking forward to seeing you in the next episode of Ignition Time. Take care. Bye.